Hello, everyone. This discussion is a panel discussion entitled Student Perspective on Research and Creative Endeavor a Year Later. My name is Ryan Huffman. I am an associate professor of graphics and imaging technology at Pittsburgh State University.
Hello, I'm Audrey Dainty, and I'm a recent graduate at Pittsburgh State University in the Graphics and Imaging Technology Department.
Hello, I'm Grace Hayworth, and I'm a GIT student at Pitt State.
My name is Josh Teagarden. I'm going to be a senior at Pittsburgh State University in the graphics department as well.
So, as the title implies, that the last part, a year later, this is a kind of a sequel, if you will, to a panel discussion that we had at last year's UCDA Education Summit. And last year, we got a panel together to talk about these types of things, and it was the first year that I had created this course, and we had some really eager students, and actually Audrey was one of them who's gone through the process twice now. And it was a really engaging and enlightening panel. We thought that it went really well. And so this class has happened again. Last year when we had this discussion, the class was only a semester long, really truncated really quickly. This year we've had an entire year. The students that participated in this course participated in the fall and the spring, so they had more time to work on their projects and do different things. So this panel is really kind of a look back at, lessons learned and what did the students think about this process. So we've got some kind of guiding questions that we'll go along with here. And then, at the end, we might, just try to make up some questions since all of you that are watching this now weren't there to ask us some of these questions. So that first guiding question we have is, what strategies are effective to get undergraduates to engage in the research and creative endeavor process? So this is something I really struggled with. I personally really appreciate and love to interact with students and want them to engage with research more. But with creative-minded students like what we have, sometimes it can be difficult because just the word research is kind of a buzzword that might, make some students shrivel up and want to go in their shell, right? I don't want to spend countless hours in the library reading books. I don't want to, write a 50-page paper. All these things that the word research might kind of evoke, all these different emotions. So I really wanted to tackle it in a different way. And quite honestly, I didn't want a class where everyone was writing gigantic papers and, we were going about it in maybe the more traditional way. So I really wanted to open students' minds to the idea of, research, how number one, how important it is, and how just because we're not, in the biology department, in the chemistry department, in physics, it's still very important. And all of these things, that we use on a daily basis, the content aware tool in Photoshop, right? That was based on research. All these different things that we use, why do we do them? What are the answers behind that? And on the flip side of it, the creative endeavor process, that's something that I really use as a tool, to let students know, hey, that's an amazing, logo that you made. That's a poster or a series of infographics or photos or whatever it is, these creative, fantastic things that students make. Well, when you think about it, you weren't born with that ability. You didn't, you had to learn all of that. And that creative endeavor process is something that each student has to go through on their own. And it's their form of research, right? It's their form of new discovery to figure these things out and to dig deep. And I wanted this class to be a place where students could just kind of explore that idea and just run free with it. We have a capstone course that's called Senior Project, just kind of like it sounds. You pick one project and you work on it the entire semester. And I think that some people could almost view this research course in a similar vein, but it's very different because a senior project course may or may not involve very much research. It's up to that person, and And I see Audrey kind of smile there a bit because she just went through the course and she did use a lot of research. She did an awesome job of doing that. But this is very different because research is the main focus in this course. You know, the creative output you have at the end, it only happened because you did the hard work up front, right? You didn't go into it thinking this is the creative work that I'm going to create and it's just going to happen. It's going to be really easy. This is something that the students need to understand the why and the how to be able to get there. And also, you know, does it matter? I mean, that's something in graphics we have to think, like, we want to create things for the sake of them looking good, you know, being aesthetically pleasing. But, you know, if it doesn't hit an audience, it doesn't, it doesn't make an impact, then, you know, was it successful? You know, were we just making something because we wanted to make it? That type of an idea. So a lot of what I personally kind of recruit students for this course. You know, the students that are here, they were recruited. And it's from this idea that they were students that I either had in class or I had other interactions with that I could tell wanted to be challenged. You know, they wanted something else. They can go through a class and they would pay, you know, great attention, take great notes and get good grades. But at the end of the day, like, they wanted something more. And those are the types of students that I would be talking to about, you know, have you ever thought about research, and have you thought about, you know, this or that, and you want this big project, but why are you doing it? And how, you know, do you want to go about looking at the fundamentals of how to do that type of thing and who it's going to impact and all those types of things. And so I don't even call the class research, isn't even in the name. The fall class is applied creative endeavor. The spring class is applied creative endeavor. And the whole idea there is students are doing the research sometimes without being totally aware that they're doing the research, right? I mean, and that's okay, because, you know, once they come to our class sessions, and this was a by appointment type of a class, we would meet kind of randomly, you know, just a couple of times a month sometimes. And when they would come and they would give an update about where they were, you know, then we could talk about, well, why are you making this logo that way? Why are you taking the picture in that manner? And that would kind of build up this conversation about the importance of research and how it impacts the final product. So that's kind of a nutshell, the answer to that first question, right? The idea of sometimes it's difficult to get students, creative-minded students, engaged in research and creative endeavor, and why it's important, and you know, some strategies to maybe get them involved. And of course, one of the biggest and best ways that was a catalyst to get students involved this time was the success of the last class. You know, Audrey was part of that class, and she presented not only on the panel last year at UCDA, but she also presented her poster. In fact, I believe she had 2 posters. Is that right? Yeah, that's what I thought. So many of the students that went through the course last year did present at national conferences, had their papers are accepted. They, you know, won awards at our local research colloquium at Pittsburgh State University. And, you know, the students saw that success, and they, you know, they wanted to take part in that as well, and push themselves to see if they could present at a national conference like we're doing right now. So let's go ahead and move on to our next question. So we're going to turn this one over to the students now. And I just want you guys to be thinking about, from a student perspective, how does the perception of the class, like maybe when I first talked about it to you, how does the perception of the class compare to the reality of working on your research project?
So, like you mentioned there, Ryan, with the way the class was brought up to us, I mean, you scouted us out and approached us individually. And when you came to me and said, hey, do you want to do research? Like you said, research is a buzzword, where it's like this big scary thing, and it's not very common, at least in the current curriculum at Pitt State, for research in graphics or in arts or anything like that I was accustomed to. So having that, what I knew about research from having a science roommate was, I was like, how am I going to do this with graphics? But taking the class and engaging with it, the discussion portion of the class, which was the majority of the meetings that we had, was just discussion based, really highlighted how this is different, but still the same. Like, we're still accomplishing things, but in my experience, at least, like the GIT department works a lot differently than other departments on campus. So the discussion part of it was really what highlighted the class for me. I kind of got lost in that. I don't know. It's weird.
No, I think, just to add something to that, I think, you're right about the rest of the department kind of really works on this hands-on model, right? Where most of our classes, they're like in a lab and you're working with, photo equipment, or you're working on a press, or, you're working on your computer to create designs and stuff like that. And you're right, this was more discussion based, and that's the way I obviously wanted it to be, this kind of theory based idea, where we don't have a computer in front of us. We don't have, a book telling us what's the next step, that type of thing. Like, we have to bounce ideas off of each other.
Yeah, I think
Go.
Okay. I think it allowed us to like step back and actually analyze what we were doing in class, especially like what I dove into in my research was like something that I was interested in class, but like we didn't have enough time to cover it. So I gotta like take a step back and actually look deep into what it was and what it meant.
Yeah, I think it's like a gentle push to see that you can take these projects, even whether they're for school or passion project or like things that you just enjoy personally as a creative. But this was like a gentle way of pushing you into saying like, look, you still do research even with these projects, and you can expand on that within this class and to really broaden that horizon of research within the creative field.
That's good. And I'm going to break from our set of questions just for a moment, because it dawned on me, since there's three of you, would you each just take just just like a minute or so, just to maybe talk a little bit about your projects, and just kind of what you did, what it entailed?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and start. My project this year was actually with Ryan, and we worked on creating a photographic mural to install in our downtown to kind of not only inspire art and creativity in our area, but also to kind of hopefully try and portray a message. And so with this project, we had to research into like the best methods of this, because a lot of times you see like painted murals or statues or something like that downtown, and we hadn't seen very many different like photographic type murals in our area. And so we had to do research into what would be best for like what we wanted to take photos of to portray a message, and how we would produce those, and what we would use to make sure that once it was installed, it was actually like sturdy enough to withstand different temperatures and weathers and stuff. And so just a lot of, and even coming down to finding a location for it and making sure that was approved and stuff. And so a lot of different variables that had to revolve around research there.
All right, and then mine actually arose from a problem that I had. So I was just a student trying to make my own font, and I really couldn't find anywhere like online where it was just like a simple how-to guide. So I decided that's where I wanted to take my research. So I just compiled information from like typography textbooks, professionals, and then professors in the field, and just like got their input and compiled all of the information. And it ultimately turned out to be kind of like a 10-page paper, but it was like something that I really enjoyed, and I got a lot out of it. Like, font making and type design can go so deep, and there's so much more than what can be covered in a class.
So my research was based on developing a tutorial for including two-dimensional artwork in advertising, because I'm a marketing minor, so I was interested in that. I developed this tutorial for a process that I'm calling multi-dimensional mixed media, where you take two-dimensional artwork that, like, for example, I watercolored this, cut it out, print it out, put it into a little studio around a product that I was highlighting, for an advertisement. And in doing that, not only did I create this tutorial for something that hasn't existed, but I went out to focus groups to see whether or not this was better than the status quo, that if in certain markets, this multidimensional mixed media advertising would be better at appealing to consumers.
Okay. So thank you guys for sharing. If I was looking away, I was looking to see if I had quick access to show some of your guys' work. I do have at least one thing here I can show real quick. There we go. I was able to pull up Grace's work here, just to kind of give the everyone watching this, our audience, an idea. When she was talking about her font foundations, like this is her booklet that she made, just to give kind of a quick overview of what that looked like. And as we go on and talk, I'll pull up. Either I can pull up, or actually Josh and Audrey, if you happen to have your stuff, anything you want to show on your local computer, you can just holler at me and you can share your screen. But this does kind of give people an idea of what the final product was. Since I believe, if I'm not wrong, Grace, would you have been presenting this as a poster at UCDA, if not for COVID?
The poster was, kind of like a condensed form of all of this, but then I kind of planned to like have the booklet on hand so that people could actually see it.
And I see I'm sharing the wrong screen, aren't I? Or am I not? No.
Now we can see you.
Yeah.
Okay. But could you see the booklet?
Yeah, we could.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. All right. Zoom probs. This new world, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you guys for sharing that. And something that I zeroed in on there that you guys were talking about was the idea of like, not just like wanting to create something, but also like having a problem, right? And I think that's one thing that is kind of easy to pitch this to students in general. If you can kind of say, hey, solve a problem, right? I mean, that's what the whole class is all about. If you have a problem, you want to solve it. And sometimes it's difficult sometimes it's really easy to put it into those terms, and then other times it's really difficult to put it in those terms. Like with Grace, she talked about specifically that this was a problem, right? Whereas other students, like, they might have an idea of what they want to create. Like, hey, I want to create this photographic mural, like Audrey's talking about. And it's kind of like, well, what is the problem? Because part of the process that I'll go over here in a moment with the curriculum is this idea of making a research problem, like structuring that research problem. And sometimes when students get to that, it's kind of like, well, what is my problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's always a problem, always. Even if it's just, hey, I really want to design this certain thing. Well, the problem is you don't know how to get there. You've got the idea of what you want to do, but you're not sure how to get from A to B. And if there's all these steps in between, and that's, part of solving the problem. So let's move along so we make sure to conserve our time as best as possible. What do you feel like are the benefits of undergraduate research for you going through this process? What do you guys think?
I think it just allows us to really dive into the topics in class. I don't know, like gives us a better understanding of what we're doing. And then it also like allows you to see like less of the creative side of graphic design and more of the scientific side, because you can do research on it and that it's not only creative based, like it has scientific backing.
I think personally, it really expands, kind of like Grace mentioned, it expands your knowledge on topics that you either discuss in class or that you find interesting, or even a mixture. But it also kind of expands your skills as a creative. Because personally, before I started any of this research, I remember coming into college and thinking like, and seeing different presentations of research and people discussing it, and a lot of those were like science-based individuals, and I was like, wow, cool, I'll never have to worry about that. But it was like once I got started on it, I personally was just hooked, and I really enjoyed the having that critical thinking aspect and the problem solving, and seeing that you can still create something cool as a creative endeavor but have research behind it to back it, and to add that like additional sense of validity, I guess, to it, because especially whenever you explain it to somebody, and the process you went through. And so I think it's provided me with a lot of skills, especially as I go out, I enter into the world in my career and stuff, and I can apply these different research skills as I go into my future. So
Yeah, and like Audrey was talking about with skills, in the research that I did, I created a method, and I used the method, and I tested the method. So they increased my marketability, because I went to companies with like Career Day and said, there's a few photography companies where I said, I've done stuff like this. And I believe that it shows business owners or potential employers that this person is engaged in this. They're not just taking the degree, but they've done research, they're knowledgeable, they're engaged with it, they enjoy it, they chose to do this, they chose to seek out more information, and they might know something really valuable to us. So
yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
we'll go.
All right.
Well, I was just gonna say it kind of helps to show, like, again, the deeper sense of passion that you might have about a certain topic, and that you really are invested in. I mean, for anybody, but for us as creatives, we're really invested in this graphics degree and what we're doing, and that we want to be spending the time doing this. And I think, like Josh was mentioning, it really is a plus for employers and for other people who hear you discussing those projects.
And so that's a great point, because that's one of the key benefits I see from this course, is the idea of your impact upon employers. Like, what do they think about you? Because as you know, if I were an employer and I were looking to hire someone in the graphics field, and they had, one, first of all, if they had like a national presentation on research on their resume, that would obviously be a gold star. But it's not just the fact that, oh, they presented at a national conference, right? That in and of itself, is impressive in its own way. But what's really impressive is what it says about you as a person, right? I preach in all of my classes, I preach about soft skills, transferable skills, this idea, right, of you have to be responsible and ethical, and you have to understand problem solving skills and professionalism. And this class really brings the whole idea of problem solving, to the forefront. And so a lot of potential employers, if they see that you are engaged in research, then, if they know very much about research at all, they know that you are engaged in problem solving, and they know that you had to, fight that battle to take a tough challenge and, see it through to fruition. So I think that, Josh spoke about going to career fairs and things like that. I think that it's going to do nothing but help the students that go through this process to have another, tool in their belt, another feather in their cap, to say, not only, am I creative and, I'm technically proficient, I've also got a lot of experience with overcoming difficulty and problem solving, etc. And just presenting at a national conference also shows a high level of professionalism. A lot of these soft skills can be checked off just by showing that you've done research. Next one, and this one's kind of interesting. I think we talked about this last year. What's the difference between research and creative endeavor? And this is something I still kind of struggle with. because of that idea of like how so many people think that, well, research has to have these certain steps, right? You've got to start with this research problem, go through your methods and your processes, and come to a conclusion. And while that's not untrue, like the students still engaged in many of those traditional types of processes, there's something to be said for creative endeavor. And really at our university, I think it was Josh that kind of touched on this earlier, talking about how Pitt State we don't really have much expectation of research, especially in the graphics department, not even of the professors. We're a teaching institution. We do not have to engage deeply in research and everything. But at our institution, for me as a faculty member, they recognize creative endeavor in lieu of research, if you want to go that route. So if I show my images at a national gallery, that counts the same as having a paper published. So I really wanted to like broaden students' minds with that idea that, research is not just that, 20, 40 page paper that, you've got to get published in a scientific journal, that type of thing. It can be, it certainly can be in the graphics field, but it can also be, investigating the proper way to create that, to look into typography and to create a font, or to do a mural, or to delve into the marketing side of it, all sorts of things that can be investigated there. So, as I'm speaking to, knowing that our audience is mostly faculty members, in graphics, I do have in mind this idea of engaging students, not just with research, doing it through creative endeavor, and letting them know that, showing your images in a gallery, that is a high honor. Not everyone gets to do that. And typically the people that get to do that, it's not because they just threw something together because it looked good, because they had a reason, a rationale behind it. They got to that point because they really thought about it and figured out what they should create and why they should create it. Moving on, what lessons have been learned by the past year by the professor? But I'm also going to flip that around on the students, especially Audrey, to see what the difference was between last year and this year. This year, having time to again, I told you the first time we did it was just a single semester. Now this time it's 2 semesters, and I'm going to be doing it again coming up this fall, carrying over. So I would say something that I learned was patience, because I had time to be more patient this time around. Instead of it just being a single semester, we had 2. So time management was even more important, actually. Sounds backwards. We had 1 semester to do it. Well, time management was obviously important, but we just had to get it done. I mean, we were just up against the wall, go, 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 go. Now, all of a sudden you stretch it out over 2 semesters, and it's kind of like, oh, well, I can afford to slack off for like an entire month because I've got all this time. Oh, it's not due until April, and it's just November right now, right? So that definitely was a challenge that we all had to face, especially because we were not meeting every single Monday or every Wednesday. We were just kind of meeting randomly. When we would meet, there'd be some times when we'd go around the room for an update, and people wouldn't have an update, right? Just be like, well, I kind of haven't worked on it in 2 weeks, and I kind of forgot about it, that type of thing. Or Audrey and I were having a really big issue finding a good spot to do the mural, and that took a lot of deep digging into the community, just talking to people in the community to try and figure that part out. So I would say time management became an issue, keeping people on task, especially while all of these various things are going on. Obviously, the one variable that none of us saw coming was the pandemic. Because of that, because of that, many students could not finish their projects. Some of them are still hanging out in limbo. Audrey and I have not installed our mural yet, but we will. It's going to get done. We're just having issues with production, etc., because of COVID. A few students did a fantastic job of all of the pre-planning and everything, and they got to the point where they were ready to maybe do their focus groups or their testing or whatever, and that's when COVID happened, right? And they didn't have, they had it all planned out. Hey, I got my focus groups coming up next week or whatever, and then lo and behold, they couldn't do it, you know, and their project just kind of hit a wall with that they couldn't get through it. So that's another thing I think in hindsight. Obviously, I'm not planning on another pandemic next year, but I think in hindsight, I might move up some deadlines to push that timeline a little bit quicker, because in hindsight, we did have plenty of time if we would have just had it more structured, probably. You know, in hindsight, I think I just need to make a more structured timeline for the students to say, this is exactly when these things need to happen. I had to restructure quite a bit anyway. The fall section of the class, if you three remember, I had a bunch of assignments that were due, and they're not really, that's another thing I should explain, you know, to the audience. I tell the students on the very first day that there's not a lot of grading that happens in this class, as far as like, I'm not looking at the quality of their work a lot, saying, you know, this needs to be better quality. I expect the best quality work that they can possibly produce. That's why they're in the class. And I tell them that if that sounds scary, it's not going to, because what's going to happen is this project is going to become their baby, right? Like, this is going to be their joy. They're going to love, they should love working on this project, you know, and if they don't, they need to like step back a little bit and reevaluate and come talk to me to figure it out. But typically, you know, yeah, it's going to be stressful, but you see the light at the end of the tunnel. You know it's going to be a great project when you're done with it, so you're fully invested in it. And so it's not a matter of like, you know, Josh would show me pictures, you know, that he was taking along the way, and it's not a matter of me being like, no, Josh, that's a bad picture. It's a matter of he and I talking about, what is your vision? You know, what do you want this to look like? And how can I help you get to that point? You know, so I'm not going to be giving him like an ABC grade on the aesthetic quality of his pictures, because that's for him to decide, right? And so it's a very different type of an atmosphere because of that. But what I found out what happened, like, I just planned things out poorly in the first semester, where I thought we were going to be able to get all these things done. And because of just certain events that happened, we couldn't. So I had to reevaluate and make some big changes in the curriculum. And I am going to show the curriculum in here in just a moment. So it's definitely something I had to think about and reevaluate. So there were lessons I learned, a lot of them being in the curriculum and time management, that would probably need to be switched around. And I'm going to include here somewhere, somehow, just thought about it now, but I'll make it happen. I will include some sort of a way for people to contact me, the professors, the faculty that are watching this. I'm happy to share my curriculum at any given point in time. But just know that the curriculum for this class is very loose. It's more like a set of guidelines than it is anything else. There's not like tests and things like that, because remember, obviously each student is very, very different. Their projects are all very different. And that's also another thing that really, you know, makes it a challenge as a professor to try to wrangle all of these different things that are going on. You know, one student is doing something that's totally creative endeavor, another one's doing something that's very, very research-based with focus groups, etc. And just making sure that they all feel comfortable and they all understand where we're going. And I do think that's one other thing that I will probably do different this coming year also. I will actually have a few lectures laid out to really talk about research and the importance of it. For the most part in this class, it was like Josh said, it was discussion, right? We would come and they would ask questions, and then I would kind of lecture a little bit about, well, this is why you need focus groups. This is why, you know, you want to change this into a qualitative study instead of a quantitative study, and those types of things would take place then. But I think right up front, the first time we meet, I'll probably do a little bit more in depth. Hey, this is the basis of research, and these are the different types of research you can do, that type of thing. How about your perspective, Audrey? What do you feel like was different this time around, or and for the other two, for Josh and Grace, if there was anything you learned about it that you think, you know, if you were to redo the class or redo the project, that you do differently?
So for me, one of the things that was really different is I kind of had an idea of what to expect, of course, and I was excited to once again be doing research. But I definitely had a better understanding of what it meant to be doing research in the creative field and like having a creative endeavor throughout it. And then for our project, because we were working in a team, there were additional factors there, as well as new things I learned because of that team structure. And so when it came to like communicating with one another and with the individuals that we needed to communicate with downtown to try and find a location and stuff like that, there was additional skills built there for communication for that patience, like you kind of touched on, as well as determination, because I think, like you kind of mentioned, Ryan, was last year we had one semester to do it, and while that seems kind of like a daunting task at first, it was like you had to go with it, you had to start it, and you had to just roll with what you had and bust it out as quickly and as well as you could. But this year, because we had the full year, I think it was easy to kind of be like, oh, I have until next spring or until spring. And but it was important to stay determined in contacting people for a location of the mural and trying to find out where we could get funds if needed, and what we wanted to do as an idea, so that way we could shoot test shots and then really finalize those and things like that. And just staying focused was important, was something that I personally learned there, is focusing on that project and to make it your own. And that's something I definitely learned in the process of last year to this year, is that yes, we're doing research, and yes, some people might have more of a creative project than the others who have more of a very research-based project, but overall you are creating something that is yours at the end. And it's important that you enjoy that at least somewhat, but that I think it's very important personally to create something that you're proud of as an end result, both the research side of it and the creative product itself. And so those were definitely some things I learned from last year until this year, and just and of course just enjoying it along the way. So
the big thing that I took away from doing this research, which ties into what I would do differently, what I would change about this, was just the concept, which applies to like general life, is saying yes to things. I signed up for a much earlier conference than this one, the UCDA conference, and ended up getting my project done much earlier than I expected, which also meant that I actually got my research done, because otherwise I would have been stopped by the pandemic and it wouldn't have happened, because I needed focus groups and I needed all sorts of resources that I wouldn't have access to at my home. So by just agreeing to do the earlier conference, I got it done. And at that conference, presenting the Capital Undergraduate Research Day in Topeka, I was also given a job offer, which I happened to say yes to, which gave me a job during the pandemic. So this class was really beneficial for me for a lot of reasons for that. Doing things differently and in learning from that, it boils down to the time management and being on yourself about, I know that it's due like in 3 months, but you have to do it now so that you don't have to kill yourself over it later, because deadlines sneak up on you. But yeah, it's really beneficial in that regard.
I definitely agree with Josh. I think if I were to do it again, I would try to get my research done probably in that first semester instead of dragging it out into the second semester. Just get everything done then, and then kind of take that second semester to really refine the information I got. Because I did feel like I definitely rushed myself towards the end to try to get it all together. So that is definitely on my part, time management. And then like a bonus though to that I learned is that it's like pretty easy to contact professionals in the field. And then I was really like thankful
Yes.
for how helpful they are. Like they're out there and they really want to help like these young kids coming into the field, which is really cool. Yeah.
But yeah, what Grace mentioned just there of reaching out to professionals, it's so easy to just reach out to people, even if they say no, just keep reaching out. Even if they don't respond, it's no big deal. Um,
A lot might not respond, but you get that few and it's like pages of emails. It was amazing. Like the time that these people are putting in for people that they don't know, but just to help us out and give us that information was really cool.
Yeah, I think that goes to show how, like, probably in whatever field you're in, that there's going to be a group of people who are like-minded and want to help you and are excited for you even. And so that networking and communication with others is important, because we had to do it with our project. And so I think all three of us here have a sense of that it's important to, just go for it and reach out to people, even if you don't know if they'll respond. And I think another thing that we all kind of touched on in a way is the fact that, um, there's some procrastination that happens in there, and that's probably naturally as, college students. But I think, for me, the difference between like last year's project and this year, but overall just the class as a whole with the research side of things, is that I think it's easy to come in and be overwhelmed by the fact that it's, research. And we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but it can be overwhelming because we aren't quite as used to that in our field, in the graphics industry especially. And so that was a big thing that was very beneficial for me to learn between last year and this year, because I was able to come into this year with a new perspective and knowing kind of, okay, research is not as scary as it may seem, or that people will kind of make it out to seem but that there's many different ways to go about research. And I think this class really shows that, like we've mentioned before, that there's some people who go very creative and research kind of a little bit in the back and then focus mainly on producing a project. And then there's more who are very research based. And so that was really cleared up for me between last year and this year especially.
I don't want to give anyone watching this the wrong impression that we did nothing for the first semester and the second semester. The first semester, for me at least, and for a lot of us, was really where the discussion was helpful. As we were all formulating what our research was going to be and boiling down to exactly what we did and did not want to do. And besides just meeting in class and having peer review, okay, so what's Audrey doing this week? Just like, oh, well, we're running into problems doing this. Yeah. We also scheduled one-on-one time with Ryan. So we would just go in and have like a jam session with Ryan where we would just bounce ideas off the wall and figure out, oh, I don't want to do this, I want to do that. I had like a bunch of notes scribbled with Ryan that I've probably lost or I've hoarded somewhere, where we just wrote down like, oh, okay. I don't even know what they all are, but that's where we really hammered out exactly what we wanted to do. But thinking is a lot different than having feet on the ground and doing things. So actually putting the work in and getting started as, okay, I'm going to marry myself to this idea, and I'm going to actually start working on the research and whatever it needs to be done, seemed to come a lot later, just because there was that apprehension of having to commit to the idea that you've already formulated.
Well, and I think that, you kind of like what you just talked about, that's a lot of brainstorming. And for some people that is, I think that's important to know that that's part of the research process, you know, and I
Oh,
think it's
absolutely.
easy for us because we are so used to that in the creative field that we're like, oh, we're so used to brainstorming ideas for photos or designs or logos or whatever it may be, that we don't think of that as part of research, but it really is. And I think that that was a majority of the first semester, especially for most of us, was kind of just discussing these ideas either one-on-one with Ryan or in the classroom, and then brainstorming and looking up, okay, well, this is what I want to do for our images from the mural, or this is what we want to do. And that brainstorming process is a part of research. And I think it's easy to kind of just forget that and discredit the brainstorming because we are so used to it. But it definitely is a huge part of that process.
Yeah, and I know that I think something even beneficial for me about like the brainstorming process and the discussions we had was, you know, sometimes you guys, the students will have an idea and it only makes sense to them at first, right? Like, like, and they have to explain it to the rest of the students in the room and like get them to understand it. And just that little thing, right? Just pitching your idea and why it's important and why it matters and why you care about it, like just that can give you the footing that you need to just really invest in that project, right? I mean, because I know Josh was having some difficulty having, you know, explaining to people what the final goal, what the final end product was going to be, right?
Yeah.
And, go ahead.
So that was a really good point that you brought up, because my topic is a little bit more abstract to begin with, and it's kind of a difficult thing to just explain. It's a very visual thing, so just using words to explain it is difficult. But having to pitch it to the group and to Ryan and to bring Ryan up to speed as, okay, here's what I'm trying to create, and having to, you know, sketch out little doodles to bring together what I was trying to do, helped me later when I did present my research in person at the Capital Undergraduate Research Day, because I was under the impression that people would read my poster and then ask me questions, where this was simply people walking by and saying, "What is this?" And I had to pitch them the idea like I'd been doing in class, just explain to them really briefly, this is my idea, this is how it works, here's what I found.
Yeah, it's more difficult than it sounds at first, right? I mean, like it's like we talk about the elevator pitch, because at like the research colloquium or, you know, at the undergraduate research summit, then it's kind of like, hey, you're going to have 3 or 4 minutes to try and capture someone's attention.
Yeah.
How do you take a year's worth of work and distill it down into 3 or 4 minutes, right? It's a real challenge. But if you get to the point where you can do it and you can hook them and get them interested, then you know you've done a great job. Okay, guys, so we're nearing up, actually, getting close to the time that we had kind of allotted to this, and it just proves, you know, how great discussion can make the time fly by. The last thing the last question I had on here, and the last thing I wanted to do for all of the faculty out there that might be watching this is, you know, like the question was, what is the structure of the curriculum for such a course? So, you know, if we were presenting in person, obviously I would have popped this up on a projector. So I'm going to go ahead and share a screen to show everyone what this looks like. Okay, so can we confirm that you're seeing my Canvas page?
Correct.
Okay, fantastic. We work with Canvas as our LMS, and this is the shell of our Canvas page here. You can see that first thing up there, we've got a timeline, and this timeline, all of the stuff you're seeing, this is for the spring semester, since remember there's 2 separate classes basically. So you can see this timeline started in January and just kind of gave them updates on what was going on each week and what they needed to have done by that time. And you can see that, you know, we don't have a COVID pandemic scheduled in there on week 9, but it happened nevertheless. So that is something we talked about in lessons learned. I am 90% sure that I did not do that for you guys in the fall, make that timeline. And I think it's because I learned in the fall, hey, we need this timeline, especially because in the spring, that's when things were happening quick, right? Like you got to have the poster done, you got to have your presentation done, you got to have this and this and this done. So I did feel like they needed a little bit more structure. The next thing, this project outline, I instilled this year. I did not use it last year in this course. I wanted everyone to get a little bit of a sense for some of the things that you would need to do in a traditional research project, even if theirs was not a very traditional research project. So things like just giving me their title of the project. And what I did up here is I provided them some resources, like a guide for defending and writing theses, and an example of a project that a student and I had done and presented at a couple of conferences, writing an introduction, and I give them a sample of an introduction that I've written, a statement of the problem, research problems, breaking it down into smaller chunks. They had to talk about like delimitations and limitations of the study, some assumptions that they would talk about, then list any of their materials they needed, their methods, and their conclusions and recommendations, and then any references they might have used in that study. So, I did not ask for a review of literature because not everyone necessarily would have exactly that type of information, but you can kind of get an idea that they're loosely constructing a research paper without actually making a research paper, right? They're basically filling out chunks and sections of a research paper one at a time. And they had the entire semester to work on this portion. So they could kind of come in here and you see I have it set up like a quiz, and they can just come in there and fill out some of it and come back to it later and delete it and add to it, whatever they wanted to do. The reason I did that was not only so they could think about what they're doing in a research mindset, but also I wanted them to basically use this information to be able to build their poster. So that was one requirement everyone had. They had to present at the PSU Research Colloquium, and then they had to submit to a national conference or some sort of a national competition. So like if they were creating purely creative endeavor and they were making like photographs or something, I wanted them to submit those images to a national gallery or competition or something like that. So at the end of the day, filling in these questions in this quiz would give them the ammo they needed to kind of plug and play on their poster. Not verbatim, obviously, because they might put a lot of information in the quiz, but it gave them something to choose from and kind of, gave them that basis to look off of. Coming back home here, we had just bi-weekly updates, and that's just another time management tool that I would use to make sure that, they're just staying current, make sure that they are doing something. And even if they didn't do anything, they still give me an update just so that it's on their mind, right? We didn't meet this week, but this is what I did, or this is what I didn't do. Again, you can see they're only worth a point, which the way I structured the course, each point equaled a % of their grade. So if they didn't do a biweekly update, that means, a 99% is the best they could get in the class. It wasn't graded on, oh, well, you didn't do anything, so you don't get that point. If you do the biweekly update, you get the point regardless, but it's really a time management tool. Then our group meetings, 3 points for those because you needed to show up and be, in attendance for those to talk about different things. They had to submit to the research colloquium at Pitt State and either create a poster for that or an oral presentation, and they would turn that in here. They each needed to do some sort of documentation of their process. So obviously for some people, this was a lot easier than others. Some people, like one of our students she was doing what's the difference between creating your own liquid splash effects in photography versus using stock images for this. And she went out and interviewed different professional photographers to see which they used and why they used them to try and get this idea of how many people use each one. And for her documentation process, she made a time lapse of actually creating the splashes and taking pictures of them and then editing them all together. So that was a little bit easier to do. Whereas like Grace's was a little more difficult to show. You know, there's nothing really to show much of a time lapse of, you know, like creating the booklet or anything, or all of the work that went into it on the back end. So, you know, she could turn in the actual booklet itself because that shows the documentation of what she did. We didn't get to do this. Another thing that I was really excited about, but we did not get to do it because of COVID, was the students as a group needed to plan a presentation for the department. This is something we did do last year, and it went really, really well. All the students put their posters up, and we had other students come up and look at those posters, and, you know, obviously that kind of got some other people interested. And so we really wanted to be able to do that, and I really wanted the students to plan that out themselves, but we didn't have enough time for it. It didn't happen. Then a national competition, journal, or conference. Obviously, I've already said they needed to submit their work to either a national competition, try and get it published in a journal, or submit to a conference. And you can see that at least the 3 that are here submitted to UCDA and were accepted. So congratulations to all of you 3 publicly here. Again, they were not graded on if they were accepted or not. Okay, that was not the point of it. The point of it was to put themselves out there and compete, and, you know, and see, you know, what the outcome of that was. Many of them did submit to UCDA. Not all of them were accepted. Some submitted to other things and were accepted. So it was kind of a hit and miss. And some people submitted to multiple ones and were accepted as well. And then soft skills is something I grade in every one of my classes. Obviously, in this case, time management probably would have been the biggest one to be dealing with. But just to give the viewers a really quick look at that, things like attendance, time management, professionalism, communication, quality of work, participation, teamwork, and critical thinking. All of those types of things. Now, again, 2 points for each one of them doesn't seem like much, but that's basically 2% for each one of these things. So it compiles up to 14%. So if you came to all the classes on time and everything, great. But if you didn't pay any attention while you're in there and you didn't really, contribute to the conversation, then maybe you'd lose points down here in participation and teamwork. That wasn't much of a problem at all, obviously, in this class. These students were excellent, did a great job the entire time, but it's still something that, we did have a couple of students that just really, really got behind, and they needed a little bit more pushing and a little more one-on-one help to make sure that they still met the deadlines and stuff. But for the most part, obviously that's not an issue. And then down here, just the resources of different things they needed. You'll notice there's no PowerPoints in here, anything like that. And it's not set up like maybe a traditional online course or something where each module is, okay, I have to complete this, 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 and this. This is a very much, self-guided type process, this class is. This is the only structure they have. And then we meet and we talk about it. And then I do heavily rely on each one of those students to understand that, hey, you're the one that knows how hard do you need to work this week? Can you take a week off, or do you need to work extra hard this week to catch up on the stuff that you didn't do the past 2 weeks? That type of thing. And so again, in the end, I think it just shows a tremendous display of soft skills when these students do get through this and they get accepted to a national conference like this or something like that. It's the icing on the cake, the cherry on top, that you guys have done such an excellent job working on this. It's almost been, for some of you, it's a full year journey. It was like this time last year, or even before that, actually, when I would have started talking to these students, trying to get them interested in this course, back in the spring, of last year, to get interested in this course, to enroll in it in the fall. And congratulations again to all of you for just thinking about that entire process, where you started, and here you are, the culmination of all of your work presenting in a national conference. So well done, kudos to you. My last remarks would just be, if any faculty out there are interested in, if you want to ask any questions of me or the students, and you want any of this information about curriculum, you can email me, chuffman, HUFFMAN, at pittstate, PITTSTATE.edu. Feel free to contact me, and if you have a question for a student, I can forward it on to them and send you a response. Do any of you have anything you'd like to, any parting words you'd like to say? Not really?
I think it's just, we did this panel last year and it was kind of a new thing. It was a new thing for us, and I think a lot of people saw it as a new opportunity as well. And so I think I just want to thank you, Ryan, for pursuing this as a professor and allowing this opportunity for us as students, starting with the semester-long class and now this whole year-long class. And thank you for putting in that time and effort to provide a new class for us to learn something completely new that, we didn't really know much about, and to have an opportunity for research in the creative field.
Yeah, I'm just very thankful to get to be a part of this class.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Fun, and it taught good skills, solid skills that I've already made use of.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, that's all anyone can ask for. Thank you guys so much. You've done an excellent job. I'm very proud of you. Thank you for everyone that tuned into this and made it all the way to the end. Appreciate it. I hope, I wish all of you that watch this the best of luck if you decide to go down this path, either with just one student or a group of students. I guess that's the one thing I didn't mention. I think we had 11 students in this class, either 11 or 10, I think. And so obviously not all of them are on this panel, but all of them were successful in all their different ways. So I would really, really, impress upon any faculty out there that are thinking about doing it. It is a fantastic, it takes a lot of work, but it is absolutely worth it all the way to the end. And I'm happy to help anyone out there that would like any of that help. So with that, I think we'll conclude this panel. Thank you for tuning in.